Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Orbit Football Podcast. It has definitely been a minute for us here over at the Orbit Football Podcast. The last episode that we did was our award show. We planned on doing a National Signing Day show, but with the holidays and everything, it just didn't work out with a bunch of our schedules. But we have a bit of a break today, and we have some time. You're joining myself, Kate. I got Blake with me today. Tyler, unfortunately, could not join us here today. Like I mentioned, just the schedules and the holiday madness has kind of got to us here. But Blake and I are here today. We're going to be previewing the New Year's Six Bowls as well as the college football playoff. You know, the semifinals, really big coming up with the weekend. It kicks off tonight here shortly, right after this episode will come out. Will be the first New Year's Six Bowl, Ohio State and Missouri for the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic. That'll be the first New Year's Six Bowl. We've got two on Saturday, the 30th that will be going on. Those will be the Peach Bowl, kicks off at noon, as well as the later bowl game that day, which I believe is the Orange Bowl at 4 o'clock between Florida and Georgia. And then after that, you've obviously got New Year's Day, where you've got the last remaining New Year's Six Bowl that isn't a playoff, unless I'm missing one. I might be missing one here or there. I think there might be two. Anyways, I'm trying to think of the different days where the different playoffs are going to be. I believe, no, there are multiple on New Year's Day. There's obviously the one to kick off at the early stages of the day. That one's the Oregon. That's the Fiesta Bowl, where we get to see Oregon take on Liberty in that bowl game. And then we've obviously got the college football playoff semifinals, where we're going to have Alabama taking on Michigan in the Rose Bowl, and then the later game will be Texas and Washington in the Sugar Bowl. So let's waste no time and get into the first bowl game that we're going to do for the New Year's Six. Obviously, you can keep up with us and our records and everything. We've been posting pretty regularly, but going into this one, we got to talk about the playoff first, Blake. I think that's really the best way to go, and why not just save it all for what's probably going to be really might be the game for the favorite in that national championship game. Alabama and Michigan, Rose Bowl, out where it needs to be, obviously, fantastic atmosphere, fantastic place to be to play a bowl game. But Alabama, Michigan's number one team in the country right now, undefeated, Big Ten champs. Alabama, the controversy, they snuck their way into the college football playoff. They are there, though. How are we thinking about the Rose Bowl come January 1st?
Yeah, like you said, massive one here. Of course, big playoff game. And like you said, this will probably be going in the national title game. The winner of this, more than likely, will be favored to win it all against the winner of the other game that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But with this one, I mean, Alabama, when they snuck in there, immediately in my eyes became the favorite to win it all. They've got the best roster. They've been playing the best of late of anybody. They've got the most talent. Piled up there through recruiting, through the portal, through all that. But they're playing a team that's looked, incredible all year long. I mean, Michigan has been about as solid as you can come. They really haven't ever fallen down. They've, obviously no losses to coming in undefeated. The weaknesses haven't really showed too much for Michigan this year. It's been solid football all year long. They've had all the controversy, obviously, throughout the year. They now have more again with the annual Jim Harbaugh to the NFL rumors that we hear every fall now. Those things keep popping up. So, things pile on Michigan more and more with the questions and controversies off the field. But on the field here, I mean, like I said, they've played great all year long. Not really many, true weaknesses here, but one of the biggest things I'm looking at in this one is Michigan's offensive line has just been extremely banged up recently. Obviously, you lose a All-American for the season here in the Ohio State game with Zach Zinter out now for the rest of the year with a tough injury. But outside of that, I mean, they've still been banged up all along the line. They've been moving pieces around pretty frequently, trying to fill guys in. I mean, it's a veteran group. It's an experienced group, They can fill these spots in decently, but when you're going against a front that's one of the best in the country in Alabama, and they've shown that all year long. They've been right there with a couple other, with Texas and with Oregon and Georgia as being and A&M as well as being one of the best defensive fronts in all of college football. And the way they developed through the back end of the year, they are one of probably the two best, if not the overall best. The other one resides in the other college football playoff game that we'll talk about later. Again, like I said, but this is it's an Alabama front that can be disruptive in the pass game. Off the edge, they've been incredible. You've got Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell coming off the edge, the best pass rushing duo in the game right now. a couple guys that are going to have probably great NFL careers. They're Sunday level players that are still playing on Saturday, so they're going to they're going to make JJ McCarthy's game a nightmare. Because I don't think that Michigan here with the way that interior's been banged up, um, and with just the overall talent level of the interior defensive line of Alabama, I don't think Michigan's going to see a whole lot of success running the football. And if you have to rely on JJ McCarthy to drop back and pass the ball, which we've seen it multiple times throughout the year against Penn State. Quickly on that game, Michigan saw that that McCarthy was going to be pressured heavily. That's why they ran the ball 20 some odd times consecutively in that game, 28-29, I think it was. It was because on those first few drives, McCarthy immediately off the edge was pressured, and as good as the edge rushing talent there for Penn State is, Chop Robinson obviously was taking control of that game early until he went down. Um, as good as that talent there is, I mean, Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell, are a far better duo. You can debate on a solo player being better, but it's a better duo. So you're going to have extreme pressure coming off of both edges. The Kevin Steele defense can pressure a quarterback well. It's what he's always been able to do. It's been it's his strong suit as a defensive coordinator is scheming, really nice blitzes to get after the quarterback. So McCarthy's going to be under pressure if he has to throw this football, and he's more than likely going to have to. Um, so immediately on that side of the football, it's a not ideal matchup for Michigan to say the very least. And you flip to the other side there with the Alabama offense versus the Michigan defense. Michigan's got a good solid defense. Not really a whole lot of weaknesses. Up front they've been solid. They've been able to penetrate inside. A solid amount. Um, that's been one of the big parts of of that defense. They're built well outside. They've got a couple of good corners there. Sanderstill, Johnson. They've had their moments in the sun. They've also had their down spots, but for the most part, they've been top tier, top end corners. Uh, so, but they're going to go against another great receiving core here in Alabama. Um, and they're going to go against a quarterback who's going to be able to extend the play. And that's Milroe's specialty is, get out, extend the play, either wait for something to happen downfield or just get down the field with your legs. It's a tough thing to stop for Michigan. They're going to be out athleted here overall. I don't know that they're going to necessarily be out physical or outmatched physically with their defensive line to Alabama's offensive line. That Bama O line has come together really nicely. As compared to what they were at the start of the season. They're still far from a perfect unit, but they've been far better than they were before. And really, Michigan's built on the defensive line in a similar way to Georgia. Not to the talent level, obviously. Just no disrespect to Michigan, but Georgia with one of the best defensive line talents in all of the country there as a unit. Um, but they're built in a similar way. They don't come off the edge quick, which is where you can beat Bama best. The Alabama offensive line has struggled off the edges, Caden Proctor, especially on that left side, against quick, edges that can come off and just fly by. I mean, he's just kind of been slow out of that first step, and that's what's gotten them beat most of the time. Michigan doesn't really have a guy that's going to be able to exploit that. Georgia didn't have that either, and that's why Proctor played arguably his best game of the year against Georgia because he can handle a power move inside. He can stop that. And Michigan's going to probably there's no real way for them. They don't have a true speed off the edge rush guy there that can really take advantage of the weaknesses of Proctor or anybody else there. So the offensive line matchup here is really favoring Bama against the Michigan defensive line in my eyes here. So this is just it's just not a good matchup at all for Michigan is what I'm overall getting at here. Um, I think you're going to see a game where Michigan's going to struggle to move the ball at all. I think they're going to really be in a tough spot to put up points. My score is going to show that as well. I don't see that team putting up many points whatsoever against this Alabama defense with how well they've played and with what the weaknesses of the Michigan offense are. And on the other side, I think Michigan can hold down the Alabama offense to an extent. but I think there's going to be a breaking point there. I think eventually Alabama's going to break through for a handful of scores at the very least. I just think it's going to put Michigan in a tough spot here. This is not the matchup that the Wolverines wanted to draw, after a great season. Obviously that's not what they wanted. It's just, and I think it's going to come crashing down here at the end of it. I think we're going to see Michigan with another a first round exit here. I've got Alabama taking this one 34-9 over the Wolverines here.
So you're going pretty big on this one. And before I do mine, I will do Tyler's game and prediction for this game. Him and I kind of talked a little bit this morning about this game. He sat there and he just kind of agreed with you where he thought, at some point Alabama's just going to kind of wear down Michigan. Tyler has the closest out of all three of us, I will say, for this ball game, but he's also going with Alabama in this one, 26-13. But I agree here. Here's the other thing that you didn't really hit on here about this game, Blake, is that you're giving Nick Saban a month. You've given this man basically a month to prepare to play Michigan. And, here's the thing that I think is going to happen. I think that we're going to see on one side of the ball and one facet of the game, there is going to be a severe, severe coaching difference between these two teams, and I think it's going to be with Sharon Moore on Michigan's offense and Kevin Steele on Alabama's defense. I think Steele is going to lap the field when it comes to coaching against Moore in this game, whether it's down the stretch of the second half, whether it's early in the second half. Something is going to happen where I'm just going to sit there and saying Michigan is getting out-coached, period, right now, and I think we're going to see that in this game. I think that you're giving... You're basically what it is Michigan right now has, for those that are unaware, I believe they have the longest streak right now out of active Power 5 teams, longest bowl losing streak. They're at 6 right now is what they're at. They're tied with Indiana. For those of you that don't know, Indiana's not playing a bowl this year, so only, one team will sit alone at the longest. It'll either be Michigan at 7 or it'll be Indiana if Michigan can beat Alabama. And for Michigan to sit there and break their streak and have to go play Alabama, an Alabama team that was written off too, I mean, it's game over. And as soon as I saw this matchup, I thought that this is to me personally, out of the teams that were kind of around the talk of the college football playoff, I'll say this, outside of Florida State, I think Michigan, when you put them on paper, I thought they were the worst team, if that makes a bit of sense. I didn't think that they matched up well against other teams, besides really like Ohio State and maybe like Washington. But I don't like them matching up against a lot of other teams. I mean, when you look at, I believe at the end of the year when I ended up having my top 7 before we ended up going into conference championship week, I think I had Michigan at 7. Yeah, and I mean, there's not much else I can say about it because I don't think that this team is – I don't know how Michigan's going to move the football in this game unless they run for like 200 – like run like they did against Penn State, like you said. They're going to – Michigan is going to have to just maybe be in this game. They're going to have to just run the ball, and I don't know if they're going to have success with it because I don't see a way that they're throwing the football with any bit of success unless they attack the tight ends. And even then, I just think Alabama has a perfect recipe with Downs. I think that they could just put Downs on Colson, Loveland, and it could work out for them. Where, look at the outside. Alabama might have, the more and more I think about it, these two teams personally do have some of the best secondaries in the country. I think it's really, it's these two are probably my top 2 if I had to think about it, of Alabama and Michigan. And I think Alabama's number 1, and I think Michigan's number 2. But here's the difference is that Alabama has a bit more, I don't even know if, I will say this, Alabama does have a bit more talent on the outside matching up against those defensive backs of Michigan, while Michigan has the disadvantage there. I mean, no obviously bad talking for Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson, but I don't know how they're going to have success against a Terry and Arnold and a Kool-Aid McKinstry. And, one of those two had a pretty down year by his standard, and Kool-Aid. And Arnold played up Arnold this year's just been a ball magnet. He's been a guy that's been able to just, he's had a knack for the ball, I guess. He's been able to get a couple interceptions here and there, and it's been a good position for him so far this year. And, obviously those two will probably end up getting for the most majority of this game, Roman and Cornelius. And I don't know how Michigan is going to, I don't know how they're going to combat that because J.J. McCarthy, he really kind of wowed me in that Ohio State game because that's probably the best performance he's had of his career, and he didn't even throw for crazy numbers. It was just a very very good performance because he put the ball where it needed to be in that game. I don't know how he's going to do that against Alabama's secondary because I don't know if he's going to have those even the slimmest of windows to fit it in against Alabama's secondary. Not to mention the pass rush, like it's that. I don't know. I just think that Alabama matching up against the Michigan offense, I think this is a nightmare matchup for Michigan's offense, and really the only way that I can see them having a good shot in this game is just forcing mistakes from Milroe, because obviously Michigan's going to spy him. Jesse Minter, I think he's going to have a pretty solid game plan for Alabama, but and Michigan doesn't give up a lot of the deep ball, and that's been Alabama's really bread and butter for a majority of this season, but I think we saw a different team when they faced Georgia because Georgia was another team that didn't give up the deep ball well. And Alabama just bullied them up front. I mean, they took control of that game over Georgia, and they were the better team for a majority. They were the better team in that game, period. I mean, they led for that game. They were ahead. They looked better. They were on schedule. They were doing things that they needed to do. And I don't know how they go from that game. You give them 3 to 4 weeks off, and then tell them to go play a very similar built team, like you said, to Georgia, and they just struggle against that team. I don't see a way for it to happen. I just think that this is not a good matchup for Michigan. And with that being said, I am going to go with Alabama in this one, 31-6. I don't think Michigan's going to score a touchdown in this one. I just think that Alabama is. I just think they're going to be too good. I think they're going to be too good to Michigan. I think they're the best team in the country. I think they're going to show that they're the best team in the country and beat the number 1 team in the country with this game. But now to the other semifinal game, the All-State Sugar Bowl, big one down there in New Orleans, a rematch of last year's, I believe it was the Alamo Bowl is what it was, between Washington and Texas. Washington, undefeated, won the Pac-12 despite all odds. They went against it. Texas, obviously, they lost that early game to Oklahoma, battled back, won the Big 12, beat Alabama early on in the season. Rematch, like I said, once again. How are we thinking about the Sugar Bowl this year?
Yeah, rematch of last year's Alamo Bowl, like you said, which as a side note, there, what an Alamo Bowl we saw last night. How about those Wildcats again, Arizona? Great time for them. But back to this game here. You know, this is a fun game. I think this is going to be, the much more entertaining semifinal game to watch. Um, just with with how we kind of talked about that previous game, it's going to be a tough road for one team. I don't know that it's not going to be a tough road for one of these teams here, but I think that this is a much more even matchup and a game where we're going to see both teams have or at least one team has one really big weakness that the other team's going to be able to exploit here, and I'll get to that in a second. But what I want to start with first here, what I mentioned in the previous breakdown was arguably the best defensive front in the country at this moment. One of the top two for sure. One of them lies in with Alabama. The other one lies in this game. It's Texas. The Texas defensive front is just it's one of the best. I think it's got to be the best in college football right now. It's incredible to see what they've done. Um, their ability to stop the run specifically has been incredible. The edge rush, not perfect by any means. There's still room for it to improve there. But man, that interior, their ability to stop the run through, and even they can get it off after the passer to an extent in the interior. It's incredible. Murphy there and Sweat have just been game wreckers all season long. And so that's the first spot I want to hit on here. And this one is can the Washington interior offensive line handle that unit? Um, it's going to be tough. Um, I don't know that they're necessarily going to be looking to run the football a lot against this Texas team. Truthfully, it's not been Washington's MO. Dylan Johnson, solid back, but hasn't been, a game wrecker or anything. Hasn't been a guy that can take over by any means. Um, and Texas's biggest weakness here, to ask to move to that point, is their secondary. They've been banged up all year in the secondary. They should be mostly healthy coming to this one, but even with those injuries, being healed up, they haven't been good. particularly. They've been extremely vulnerable in the back end. That's been their biggest issue. And part of that comes from the fact that that edge presence isn't really there for Texas like you would hope it would be. Most of that rush comes from the interior. But so the quarterback has, a decent amount of time against Texas, not exceptional, but, enough where they're not being pressured off the edge to make something happen. And that's going to be a big thing for Penix here. Now, I don't know how well he will handle a interior rush versus an edge rush. I think he would have rather probably seen, an edge rush coming at him than a top end interior rush because he's gonna have to get out of the pocket with that interior more than he would with an edge, where he could just step up in, which is really what he's excelling. He excels at most of all is just staying in that pocket, stepping up and firing to one of his great receivers out wide. So we'll see how Penix can respond to that interior pass rush of Texas, but it's hard for me to believe that they're not going to be able to take advantage of this Texas secondary downfield. You've got three great receivers there. Well, even, arguably more, but three primary ones that we've seen be great all year. You've got Michael Penix, who's been great. It's been a spectacular season for Washington out there. The offense is incredible to watch, and they should be able to take advantage of Texas's secondary. Like I said, the problem is on the other side of the football. Um, Texas has been, they've had their ups and downs of the offensive line. They're a good unit though overall, and I think having almost a month to prepare and to kind of heal up a little bit. They've been a little banged up. I think. I don't think that Banks has been playing at full strength, to be quite frank. I think he's been kind of knocked around a little bit. Same with DJ Campbell there. I think he's been, a little banged up at times, but I think that's brought that unit down a little bit. But it's still a really nice offensive line. Um, and although I mean Washington saw a lot of success with their defensive front against Oregon in that Pac-12 title game, I don't know that they're going to see the same level of success in this one. To be quite honest, I think that it's just Texas is going to find a way to bleed this clock. They are going to lean on that Washington defense pretty heavily, and if they don't do it in the direct run game, they're going to do it with extensions of the run game, quick outs, receiver screens, anything that can extend the run game, just in quick out passing. Um, which they're built, to do at a really high level. You've got two, extremely quick, shifty receivers that can do a lot after the catch, and Worthy and AD Mitchell. Of course, Worthy, that's another big thing about this game, should be back fully healthy, it sounds like. Of course, he got injured late in that Big 12 title game, but it seems like he's going to be, pretty much 100%. So that's a big thing for Texas here. That's one of the biggest parts of all of this of this big break. This big break basically is just coming out to be really pro Texas, is what I should say. The big break here is really helping for Texas because they're just getting time to heal up, which is really their biggest issue. Outside of the fact that that secondary is weak. So it's going to be a tough spot for Washington, I think, in that regard. I think they're going to struggle to keep those outside receivers in coverage downfield as well. I think you're going to see Texas win over the top at some point, if not a couple of times. Washington, just like Michigan was, they're going to get out athleted here. Washington is the more athletic, or Texas, I mean, sorry, is the more athletic team, especially out wide here with their receiving core. It's tough to see any way that Quinn Ewers doesn't have a pretty high level of success in this game. Whether it is with those quick hitting passes that can turn into something after the catch, or if it's just straight up going downfield with football, which they can do either of. That's this Texas team's built really well. I thought they were a year away, to be honest with you, but they came out and they made it happen this year. So at least they've made it this far. We'll see if they can make it through this game. But with all that being said, with even though Texas is very vulnerable in a spot where Washington excels with the pass game, um, I just don't think it's going to matter that much, to be quite honest. And, I think it's going to stay close for a while because of that. But what I really think is going to be the key here is that, like I said, Texas is going to be able to bleed this Washington defense, keep them on the field a lot. They're obviously without Jonathan Brooks. That's the one thing that they are still going to miss big time with the injury bug. Brooks tore his ACL at the end of the season there, so he is still out, obviously. But even then, they've got several really really good backs in the backfield there. C.J. Baxter, obviously being the big one, the key one, the 5-star from last year's recruiting cycle, the true freshman getting, he got a lot of touches there at the back end of the season. Looked raw still, but running with ones for a whole month, getting time to prepare in that sense as well, should help him out a lot, especially against that sort of pass or sort of a run stopping defensive line. Um, he should have had a good preparation for this one. And I think that just leaning on them, all with the offensive line, trying to make that run game happen, getting it out wide quick, they're just going to keep Washington on the field. And I think it's just going to completely wear that team down. And I think it's just going to be too much for Washington to overcome here. I think it's going to be a good game for about 3 quarters, but I think probably near the end of the third, into the fourth is when you're just going to see Texas really take over this one. So I'm going to take Texas here to head to the national title game for the first time in what's it been now, 15 years, I think. So I'm going to take Texas here, 48-33, to kind of take over this game late and play for a title in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it's been 2009 was the last time Texas was in a title game when they took on Alabama. So it's been a long time for Texas. And before I get to my score and my prediction for this game, I will tell you Tyler's. Him and I talked this morning, and he just kind of said, well, I'm picking the opposite pick of you. I'm picking it close. I don't really have a read on this game. I told him my pick, so he's going to go with Texas 34-32, so that tells you who I'm going to pick. But when I look at this game, I kind of agree. I kind of have a tough read on this game because at one point I see that Texas just has a really, really good matchup here defensively, specifically up front. That Texas front with Murphy and Sweat are, like you said, it's probably the best interior defensive line in all of college football, period. And it probably isn't very close. But, Washington, we've doubted this team all year. A lot of people have doubted this team all year. And this team just finds a way to win. And it's not, some people were throwing out the TCU comparison from last year. I don't think that's the case with this Washington team. Because Washington's had to beat some good teams and have done that in pretty decent fashion. I mean, they had to go on the road in a tough game, in a rainy game against Oregon State, got the job done. They had to play Utah in their last-ditch effort of the season to try to have an upset at home, beat Utah. They had to beat Oregon, at home earlier in the season on some, fantastic work. They had to play Washington State, in the Apple Cup, their rivalry matchup, and ended up really sealing that game with a reverse, to Rome Odunze. They've had to play good teams this year. They had to go on the road and play USC, and in a tough game for them. Washington's been there. Washington is battle tested. Not that Texas isn't battle tested. I'm not trying to say that. I mean, Texas had a couple, tough spots for themselves. They had a game where Kansas State, where it looked like they were going to run away easy with the victory, and then turn the ball over 3 times within, a minute or within 5 minutes, and right there, Kansas State was right back in that game, and they almost blew that game. Texas had that stretch there. It was like the 3-game stretch where they were like up by a couple touchdowns and then blew it and almost lost like 3 games in a row. And it's like I said, it's not that they're not battle tested. It's just I don't know. I sit there and obviously them losing Brooks is a big thing for Texas, but they got guys that are easily there to replace. And like you said, with Worthy getting hurt in that Big 12 champ game, and he should be ready to roll. And I don't. Offense will not be the issue in this game. I don't think it will be at all. And I think we're going to see our defensive moments. But when I come back down to this game, it just kind of it's one of those feelings. We've talked about it where sometimes you just you see a matchup and you're like, oh, I got a feeling. I got a feeling that this team's going to win, and I get a feeling that Washington is going to get the job done. I think that these are just 2 very, very good football teams. I think this is, like you said, this is going to be the entertaining of the 2 bowl games. I think that we're more entertaining, that is. I think this game is going to be fantastic. I think this game is going to be fun. I think this game is going to be full of offense. I just think that Penix, the biggest issue I have for him is that he got pretty sloppy of taking care of the football down the stretch of the season, and that could cost Washington in this game. Even that Oregon game, he was a bit sloppy, but Oregon wasn't able to pounce on it. And Washington bullied Oregon up front in that Pac-12 championship game, and Oregon's got to, when you have Dan Lanning as your coach, you got to have a good defensive front. Like, I mean, there's not much else that needs to be said, but when I sit at it and I think about this, I just got a gut feeling about this one. I feel like Washington's just kind of they're in a spot where I feel like that they deserve, they deserve to be here. I've doubted them all year, and they've proven me wrong time after time after time after time. I did not pick them in the first Oregon matchup. I didn't pick them in the second Oregon matchup. I didn't even pick them against Oregon State, and they won all three of those games. And all you got to do is win. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And I just think that Washington has that factor to win this game. Texas, I think that I would say that Texas is the better team. But, like you said, Texas's biggest weakness is the secondary. And I think Washington is, as long as they can keep a clean pocket for Penix, I think that they're going to have a field day with that, with Odunze and Polk and McMillan. I think those three are going to go off for great games. And I think on the opposite side, you're going to see, the big three for Texas go off for great games with A.D. Mitchell, Worthy, and the tight end there. There's going to be offense in this game. Don't get me wrong. And I don't think that, as long as both quarterbacks, I didn't even really mention Ewers in this game too. They got to be clean, as they're going to put their teams in a good situation to win as long as both quarterbacks are going to be clean. And, all signs probably point to Texas in this game, but I'm going to go against the signs. I just think that Washington, they got something, that they've got something with them. And for that reason, I'm going to go with the Huskies in this one, 32-30, very close game, very competitive game. But like I said, Washington's just got an it factor, and I'm going to go with the it factor in this one and what my gut is telling me. So I'm going to go with Washington in that one. Now we'll move on to another bowl game where really the rest of them we're going to kind of keep quick because we all have a pretty similar outcome, or at least a pretty similar thought for the rest of these bowl games. But this one, Blake, the Orange Bowl, this one will be Saturday evening at 4 o'clock kickoff on ESPN, and Georgia and Florida State. Florida State obviously not very happy after not, getting snubbed from the college football playoff. Georgia, they lost their chance when they lost to Alabama. A lot of opt-outs in this game. I mean, tons of opt-outs, tons of losses on depth for both of these teams with the portal and everything that's been going on. But I think that all three of us, me, you, and Tyler, have a pretty similar thought about this game, though.
Yeah, I'm just going to read you a list here outright of the FSU opt-outs here. We've got Trey Benson, Jared Verse, Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell, Fabian Lovett, Akeem Dent, Renardo Green, and Jarian Jones. That, my friends, is the entirety of the FSU impact player list, pretty much. I mean, if you want a team that's going to get gutted by opt-outs, one that kind of epitomizes all of that, that's what that is. I mean, Florida, and of course, without Jordan Travis as well with the injury, Florida State's got nothing on the table pretty much to go to. They are playing a bunch of guys that are either backups that haven't seen the field much, or if they have, they haven't seen it in heat. Really, Florida State's in a really really bad spot here. Georgia's lost some big pieces. Obviously, Brock Bowers is opted out is the big one. They've lost, some defensive back depth, and even a couple of top end defensive backs in the transfer portal. It doesn't matter really when Florida State already was at a disadvantage roster wise coming into this game. Talent level, Georgia was going to be favored by a decent amount just based on that alone. And when you lose pretty much every impact player you have, I guess outside of Braden Fisk is like the lone big piece that has decided to play in this game. It's not a good spot for Florida State. And I hate to just to knock this one out quick, but and to kind of disrespect what Florida State's done this year because undefeated season, and not to rehash it, I think should have been in the playoff regardless of whether they are or not. Though they're not here. And because they're not, this is what ended up happening to them. They just got gutted by opt-outs. It's unfortunate that their season's going to come to an end this way. And what I am just going to say is going to be an ugly ugly football game for them. Um, it's really unfortunate for a great season for Norvell and the Seminoles to end this way. Um, but I'm not even going to spend too much time on it. Truth be told, you're starting Brock Glenn, a true freshman that we saw play against Louisville, did not look great to say the very least. Um, so yeah, not a good spot for Florida State. So I'm going to take Georgia pretty massive in this game here. I just don't think it's going to matter with the Georgia opt-outs. I'm taking them to just run through Florida State here. And I hate to say it, but it's 55-0. I just think this is going to be an absolute blowout in favor of the Bulldogs.
So you're going big, big blowout. And before I get to my pick, Tyler is also going to go Georgia pretty big. He's going 35-10. I got a shutout as well. For the same reasons that you said. I just think that, I mean, Georgia, they've been really kind of wrecked by the portal. Most of their secondary depth is in the portal. A lot of their guys, they brought in the number one recruiting class, obviously, in the country this year, at least as it stands right now, after early National Signing Day, which is basically National Signing Day nowadays. But, Georgia, when they're Bowers is not playing this game. McConkey is not playing this game. I mean, those are really their two big impact players on offense. We'll have to see. Obviously, Carson Beck has been a very, very good quarterback for them this year. He's announced that he's staying for another year and he'll be playing in this bowl game. But, they're without a couple of bits of talent, but they are not as wrecked as Florida State is in this game. And even if both of these teams weren't wrecked, I probably would pick this game pretty similarly to what I'm going to pick it, because I just think that Georgia's a better team. Period. I think they got better talent. Even with as much depth as gone, I still think that they're better than Florida State is. And I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. I think Georgia's a better team. Florida State's wrecked by the transfer portal and everything that's going out with opt-outs. Like you said, they're without their quarterback. They're without their, RB1. They're without, their entire wide receiver core. They're without their best player on defense. Like, they are just wrecked, and I don't think that there's really a way that you can come back from that and beat Georgia, a team that was just a score away from being in the national or being in the college football playoffs. So with that reason, I'm going to go Georgia. I'm going to go Georgia pretty handily here. 31-0. Easy victory for them down in the Orange Bowl. And now we'll go to the game that'll be tonight, the Cotton Bowl Classic. Interesting one shaping up, especially with some really transfer news that's happened from one of these teams. Ohio State and Missouri taking on each other. The line for this game has gone all over the place. It opened up Ohio State as a favorite by about 5, and then it went all the way to, I believe, almost to Missouri about 5, and now it's back to Ohio State favored by 5. In this game, there's been a couple opt-outs here and there for both teams, a couple key players here and there for both teams, but, obviously the biggest question heading into this one is, what's the quarterback play going to look like for the Buckeyes? And I'll turn it over to you, Blake. What are your thoughts on the Cotton Bowl Classic this year?
Yeah, this is kind of the opposite spot here from the last game. With the Orange Bowl, it's opt out city. This one, it's not. Neither team with any opt outs for the pro draft outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. for Ohio State. And each team has a handful of guys in the portal. But outside of Ohio State's, obviously Kyle McCord being in the portal is a huge one there. Some running back depth, Chip Trainum in the portal, Julian Fleming in the portal in the receiver room. But outside of Kyle McCord, everything else is more of rotational depth pieces in the portal for both teams. So, only one big player missing here, and it's Kyle McCord in the portal, I guess, as well. Of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. in the draft. That's really it in this game. That's for both teams. Mizzou kept that entire roster together for this game, which is absolutely massive. Outside of the transfers, who were all depth guys that didn't really see the field. So absolutely huge for both of these teams to have these rosters almost entirely still intact, which is really great to see for what is a massive bowl game here in the Cotton Bowl, and one that I'm really looking forward to seeing how it plays out tonight. But with this one, I mean, Ohio State I think has the talent edge. Even with Marvin Harrison Jr. being out here, um, it's going to be a tough for So yeah, of course, Mecca Ibuka will play. So, like I said, not a young guy. He's the one kind of big experience piece here for Ohio State. You assume he will go probably one on one with Chris Abrams Drain. Um, we'll see if that ends up being the case, but I would assume that's what will happen. But it's a really solid Mizzou secondary. And so you're going to see some Ohio State younger receivers get kind of that baptism by fire here in this game. And I mean, I think there's plenty of opportunity for them to come up big here and to really, show why they were all so highly recruited and highly touted coming out of high school. A couple of true freshmen and a couple of, higher end recruits there in their second year as well. They're going to see the field for the Buckeyes. But it's good on that end. You'll see the young receivers whether they step up or not. Devin Brown, of course, is the big question mark for Ohio State, like you said. Can he step in and fill in that QB role to a level equal or greater to what Kyle McCord was able to do this year? Of course, Buckeye fans all hope that it's the greater two option. I'm hesitant to say it will be, but I don't. I don't honestly know. I truly, this is the big question mark there. Devin Brown obviously looks to parlay this into a starting role next season as well. So a lot riding on the line for him. So he's going to be motivated here. But so for that side of the ball, like I said, the receiving core for Ohio State, you're going to see some young guys, but they can sink or swim against a good Mizzou secondary. Ohio State up front against this Mizzou defensive line. I think it's a pretty even matchup. I think Mizzou's got a good defensive front here. I don't know that they're going to be living in the backfield by any means, but I don't necessarily think Ohio State's going to be shoving them downfield either. Ohio State's offensive line this year, it's been questionable at times, but if there's one consistent spot of it is that their best games have been in the big games. Notre Dame early in the season was one of their best games. Michigan at the end of the season there was one of their best games. Probably was their best game, honestly, was the Michigan game. They looked solid against Penn State. They've been shaky throughout the year, but they step up in big games. And this, so if things continue as they have, you would expect them to play another one of their best games, if not as the trend would continue. I guess their best game of the year to close it out here. Which is going to be a really big key for Ohio State. You've got to help Devin Brown keep him clean when he drops back to pass, and his strength should be with his legs. We'll see if Ryan Day is willing to use his legs to run the football. I think that's I think that they will. I would hope that they will. That is Devin Brown's biggest strength is being able to run the football there. And if that offensive line can have a great day, have their best game of the year, and then Ohio State's going to see a lot of success on the offensive side of the football and a lot of success on the ground. Travion Henderson, of course, playing as well is going to be a big help for them. You switch over to the other side though with the Mizzou offense versus this Ohio State defense. I mean, the Ohio State secondary has been impressive this year. It was a spot that I think a lot of people were concerned about coming into the season. Denzel Burke specifically has stepped up into being a true lockdown outside corner, and he'll be rewarded for that performance all year long by getting to go more than likely one on, or at least into to being the guy that shadows the best receiver in the country, in my opinion, and Luther Burden, the most talented receiver in the country at a minimum. So what a reward there. But I mean, competitors want that, and I think Denzel Burke probably wants that opportunity to be able to try to cover Luther Burden here. And of course, on the other side as well, Mizzou, no lack of talent out wide anywhere here. Brady Cook has been shaky in some of these bigger games. Early in the season, the talk was him not turning the football over, and he was good at that for a while. And then, some of these bigger opponents started coming up. Some of these bigger games started coming up. The spotlight got brighter, and he didn't struggle per se. But he wavered at times. Against LSU, obviously a couple of big interceptions there that end up coming back to cost Mizzou that game. Against Georgia, a couple of really bad interceptions. One on a drive where I can't remember if it would have tied the game or taken the lead. But Mizzou had the football with a chance to, I believe it was to take the lead in that game. It may have just been the tie, but Brady Cook throws a bad interception to a defensive tackle on a screen pass. He throws another one on the following drive, and that really puts Mizzou out of that game. So he has at times struggled in the bigger spots, but he's been a great quarterback throughout the year. It's going to be really on the QBs here, I think. And you kind of mentioned that it's going to be on the QBs, which one can step up and which one cracks under the pressure. Will it be the guy that's a veteran now, or will it be the guy making his first career start? It's going to be interesting to see here. Um, the other big thing here is running the football. I think it's going to be kind of a big goal for Mizzou, which Ohio State's been good against the run all year long, but Cody Schrader's been one of the best running backs in all of college football this year. He's a man on a mission. He's playing for everything. The former walk-on out of JUCO at Mizzou here from the state of Missouri. Playing for the hometown school. Pretty great story there. And in the latter half of the season, the last 3 or 4 games of the year, he became an unstoppable force. I mean, he was taking defenders downfield every play. I look back at the Tennessee game, and that was one of the best running back performances I think I've ever seen. It was reminiscent, honestly, of the Leonard Fournette Ole Miss game from some years ago now, I guess it's been, but it was incredible to see him do that. And so, the run game's going to rely on Cody Schrader making things happen with the ball in his hands. I think the offensive line is going to, for Mizzou, is going to not necessarily struggle, but I think they're going to probably be at a best point of break even against Ohio State's defensive front, especially interior wise, where the strength of that team's at. Ohio State weak on the edges in this game. They have been all year. If they can get outside the tackles with Schrader, it's going to be a tough thing for Ohio State to take on. But we'll see how it goes. I ultimately here I'm going to take Mizzou to win this game. I'm going to take Cody Schrader and Brady Cook and co to be the winning force here. I don't know that necessarily Devin Brown cracks under pressure or anything. I just think that Missouri is going to be able to outplay that Ohio State team just enough in this game. I think they're a little, they're determined for this one. So I'm going to take Mizzou to win this one real close, 36-34. I think this might be the best of the bowl games or of the New Year's Six games that we get. But really excited for this one. So I'm going to take Mizzou to win this one.
Yeah, I think this one is going to be very entertaining. Before I get to my score, Tyler's going with the Buckeyes in this one to cover 5.5 by 6. He's going 33-27 in this one, and I think it's going to be a very interesting game because, I obviously Ohio State with losing McCord to the portal, big surprise there for me personally. Being a fan of the team in Columbus, I did not expect that one bit. As much as people have been up and down on McCord a lot this year, I expected him to be the guy in Columbus, but there's obviously. He's gone. He's moving on, and it's a next man up mentality. And a lot of people in Columbus are thinking that Devin Brown is the future. Where I'm a little hesitant. This guy was beaten out by Kyle McCord, and I've said my thoughts about Kyle McCord before on this podcast. I've made my thoughts pretty well known about McCord. A mighty fine quarterback, but he's not gonna be more than that. He's just a good, solid college quarterback, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Devin Brown, what's he gonna be? I think he brings a better facet of the game with his ability to run, and that's really been the big thing about when you hear words about Ohio State players is that he has the ability to improvise a bit more than McCord does, where McCord is very by the books and goes by his one read, but that can be a blessing and that can be a curse with Devin Brown, because he could improvise and he could improvise well, and he could improvise in a very poor fashion. Sometimes you don't know what you're going to get with the quarterbacks like that. I think it'll be interesting to see what he does because there are some talks about, maybe Ohio State gets a quarterback in the portal. I know Will Howard's name has been getting a lot of talk as of recent. But, what if Brown performs well, will Ohio State continue to go after Howard, or will they drop it and that's their guy moving forward? I don't know. We're going to have to see what the case is going to be here for Ohio State moving forward, and obviously we'll keep an eye on it. But I think that, like you said, there's not a lot of opt-outs in this game. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the big one. But besides that, everybody else for Ohio State is playing. I believe there's maybe Missouri, it seems like everybody's playing. I've seen Rakestraw's name left and right maybe opting out, but I've also seen that maybe he's playing, so it's a little bit back and forth. But, I think Ohio State's going to also try to lean on the run in this game. They are down some depth at that running back position where they really only have, I believe, two scholarship players at running back active for this game in Travion Henderson as well as Dallin Hayden, and those are the two best players that are in that backfield and were in that backfield and have been in that backfield for the past 2 years. No matter what anybody will tell you, those have been the two best players in Ohio State's backfield the past 2 years, and seeing that duo really go to work, maybe that's a duo we're going to see next year to pretty great extent. Could be a possibility. But when you look at Missouri, like you said, a really fun matchup that I'm interested to see is just Denzel Burke versus Luther Burden, and Burden has been one of the best. And you called him the best. I don't know if he's the best in my opinion, but he's definitely in the top 5 for me of receivers in the country. Just a fantastic year for him, and he's only he's an underclassman, so he's going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of talk next year moving forward, and not to mention, like you said, Cody Schrader. Schrader ended up being one of the best running backs in the country with the really torrid stretch he went on down, toward the end of the season. And Ohio State, I don't want to say they haven't really struggled against the run. There are some teams that have kind of worn them down, like Michigan kind of wore them down in that game. But I think this is a very interesting matchup because this is the best wide receiver that they've faced all year, period. Probably the best running back, I'd say, that they've faced this year, period. And it's going to be an interesting day for the Buckeyes, but and it's going to be an interesting day for Missouri because I think Ohio State's going to try to lean a lot on that backfield. I think they're going to try to run the ball pretty effectively in this game. Just make it comfortable for Devin Brown when he needs to drop back to pass. I wouldn't be surprised if they let him sling it a little bit just to see what they've got. But I don't know. I think this is just going to be a very interesting game. I think it's going to be a very competitive ball game. I think it'll be a fun game to watch, a fun game that'll go down to the wire. And I'm going to pick the Buckeyes in this one pretty close. I'm going to go 31-27 over Missouri. I just think that the talent for Ohio State will get them over the hump in this game. But don't be surprised if Missouri does pull this one out, if they can force a couple turnovers here and there from Devin Brown getting his first official start for the Buckeyes. But now to the penultimate New Year's Six Bowl that we will be talking about, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, another Big Ten and SEC matchup. This one also is shaping up to be a pretty fun one. Penn State and Ole Miss. What are your thoughts on this one, Blake?
Yeah, this one also I'm really, really excited for right there, neck and neck with the Ohio State Mizzou game. Obviously Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin has been in the news a lot with the portal class he's brought in. One probably the best portal class we've ever seen brought into a school in the portal era. But that's for next year. This year we've got the current team. Not a lot of opt-outs here. Chop Robinson obviously not playing for Penn State. It seems like Ole Miss is going to keep most of this roster together though. And not really have any guys opting out, so which is good. Outside of I think Cedric Johnson is going to head to the draft, but outside of that one, the big spots for the receiving core I was worried about for Ole Miss if they would stay or not. It seems like they're all going to play, which is really good for them. So with that, I mean, it's going to shape up to be a great matchup here. And obviously Penn State playing this game without Manny Diaz as the defensive coordinator. Of course, he's now the head coach at Duke. So, that's a big loss going into this game. But the defense is still all there outside of Chop. It's still a solid unit. It's most of the unit that we've seen all year long. Of course, Chop missed games too, so we've seen what the defense looks like without him in place, and they've looked good still. It's just a really solid unit through and through. Um, you know, sorry. But it's a really solid unit. So Johnny Dixon as well. It looks like is opting out of this game for Penn State. So another big loss certainly there outside corner spot. But they're going to keep Kalen King playing. It sounds like. So that's a really big deal for them. With what is in my opinion, really underrated Ole Miss secondary or Ole Miss receiving core here, I should say. That's a big deal to keep one of your top corners on the field. Losing one of them as well, obviously, though, really big deal. That's going to be one of the most interesting spots I think to see is how Penn State handles the Ole Miss receiving core. I think Watkins and Harris and even Dayton Wade. It's a really nice trio. I think it's a really underrated trio, as I said. I think Trey Harris, obviously the one that stands out most of the bunch. Trey Harris, I think, is one of the most underrated receivers actually in the country. I think he is, a borderline. He had a borderline top 10, or looked like a borderline top 10 receiver in college football this year at times. I just don't think he got the recognition for that. So what kind of game is he going to have? I assume Kalen King will shadow him. And if you take Kalen King out of the game or if Kalen King can take Trey Harris out of the game, what can Wade and Watkins do? And even Price scoring at the tight end spot. He's back from injury finally. He's been he missed I think the first 8 or 9 games of the year. Came back at the end of the season, looked solid when he played. He was a big missing piece for Ole Miss early in the year. They missed him a lot, and they were really happy to get him back. This Ole Miss team though is it's really good. It's an underrated team, I think. They lost 2 games to two of the 2 best teams in the SEC. They lost to Alabama and Georgia. So they lost the teams they were supposed to, and they won the games they should have. And they lost those 2 games. They lost to Alabama close. Of course, the Georgia game not so much. They got ran by that team, to be frank. But this Ole Miss team is nice. It's a good unit or a good team in its entirety. Um, Jackson Dart's going to have to play a really good game. He cannot afford to make mistakes against this Penn State team. I think that's going to be a key spot here. What can he do with his legs as well is going to be an interesting thing to see because Penn State great against the run. That's been their biggest strength all year long. So can they stop Quinshon Judkins, number one, who I think is maybe the most talented running back in the country when healthy, which he will be for this game. And if they can shut down Quinshon Judkins, can Jackson Dart do something with his legs? Can he, be that running threat that keeps the Penn State defensive line off balance and opens that running game up some more? So that's going to be a really big spot here. That's usually in games like this, Jackson Dart becomes the X factor for that reason that he can use his legs. So will he do it in this game is going to be a big question. And then flipping over on the other side, I mean, Penn State, the offense has been pretty rough to watch this year. Truth be told, they made the changes necessary. I think I like the hires they made there. But again, another thing that comes into effect next year. I'm sure that they've been working a little bit with some of that new staff on the offensive side in the prep for this game. But it's still not a full changeover yet. So. And they haven't had full time to develop into a new offense by any means. So they are what they are at this point. Um, and so with that, I mean, you look at it and you say, can they move the ball against what's been a touchy at times Ole Miss defense or sketchy at times Ole Miss defense? I think they'll move it decently. I don't think they're going to light the world on fire offensively. And honestly, I don't think they're going to be able to keep up with what's going to be a pretty successful day for the Ole Miss offense, especially considering how good that Penn State defensive unit has been. I think Ole Miss is going to have success offensively, and I don't think that Penn State's going to have quite enough to match that. I think it's going to be a close game throughout. I think it's going to come down to the end, keep it, come down to the wire. But I think this is ultimately going to be a game that Ole Miss just kind of squeaks out in. I've got Ole Miss taking this one 31-24 and capping off another 11-win season for the Rebs.
So you're going with Ole Miss in this one, and before I get to my pick, Tyler's agreeing with you. He's going Ole Miss as well, 28-20 in a close one. You mentioned Ole Miss. Obviously, their only 2 losses this year to the, probably the 2 best teams in the country in Alabama and Georgia. And Penn State's only 2 losses this year are to, 2 of also the best teams in the country in Ohio State and Michigan. Both of these teams are just kind of, they've been on the outside looking in the past couple of years when it comes to their conference and really battling for conference supremacy. And they've been hoping and trying to get to those new heights. And we'll see if either of them will be able to do it next year, obviously. I think one might. But, it's when I look at this game specifically, like you said, Johnny Dixon's out of this game for Penn State, which is a pretty decent loss for them. Obviously in Chop Robinson, but like you said, they've been out without Chop for a majority of their big games this season. He wasn't really a factor in the Ohio State game, and then he got hurt. In the Michigan game, he was lighting the world on fire, and then he kind of also got hurt again in that game. So when you look at Chop, it's they're losing probably one of the best defensive players in the country in this game, but he hasn't really been a part of the team this year a lot. So I don't know if that loss is too great, but when it's similar to the Ohio State and Missouri game where both these teams are just basically almost at full health. which is what you want to see in a bowl game like this because it's two very, competitive teams, very similar teams, I will say, when you look at them on paper. Um, you know, Ole Miss, I've been kind of low on this team a little bit this year, just because I don't think that this team really lit the world on fire. Yeah, they went 10-2 in the SEC, which is no knock to them whatsoever. But I mean, I just don't think that they lit the world on fire this year. I think that they were just a fine football team. Penn State, I thought, was the same way, even though I had Penn State as my number one team in the country at one point. After they played Iowa, I had them as my number one team in the country after that game. They looked really good to start off the season, and they just kind of didn't get better. And then they had to play the good teams in the Ohio States and the Michigans. And, it just Penn State's biggest issue is that they just never had anybody step up in the wide receiving core this year. Nobody was able to take that extra step up. They thought it was going to be Dante Cephas from Kent State. That did not happen. Lambert Smith was just fine. Warren as their tight end, he was okay. But they didn't have a dynamic player. I think there was a little bit more to be seen from a bit of their backfield this year. Obviously, Singleton. He had a pretty solid year, but Katron Allen had a bit of a down year. He wasn't as explosive as he was last year, and Penn State it's just another 10-2 Penn State team that's a very good team. And on the flip side, when you look at Ole Miss, Jackson Dart's been fine. He's coming back for another year, and they've obviously done amazing things so far in this offseason to improve their team next year. But this year's team, it doesn't really light the world on fire. Even from like I've said that earlier. Even from last year, Judkins. His freshman year, he was fantastic. I thought he was the best running back in the country his freshman year. Personally, I thought he was. And then he came back this year. He's more banged up. He didn't really get the touches he got. They struggled to run the ball a lot this year. And I don't, like you said, Trey Harris is a very good option for them, and it'll be an interesting matchup to see him go against Kalen King in this bowl game. But I just see this game playing out as a very, very low scoring defensive football game. I don't see a lot of points being scored in this game because I just don't think either offense has the explosive capability to score a lot of points, and they're going up against pretty solid defenses. Ole Miss has a pretty solid front when it comes to their pass rush overall this year. They got to Bama, a couple times in that game earlier on in the season, and I think that they could get to Penn State in this one. I think that Penn State's offensive line, Tyler was singing their praises earlier on in the season. I don't think Penn State lived up to their potential this year. It's almost like a broken record at this point. But it's we're gonna have to see what the future is for both these teams. I think it's a very interesting game because it can put one team on a good path moving forward. Just to end the year on the high note, but I just got a feeling about this one. Because I said it's going to be a low-score game, I'm going to go with the team that favors that style of play a bit more, and I'm going to go with Penn State in this one. I just think that, they're built for those low-scoring games. They're built for grinding out those games, and I think they're going to get the job done against Ole Miss. Even with a couple more opt-outs that they have compared to Ole Miss, I just think that they're a better football team than Ole Miss, and I'm going to go with Penn State in this one, 20-16. Close game. Ole Miss covers, but that'll be mine. And now to the final New Year's Six Bowl, the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. This one, there aren't really a lot of thoughts on this one. I think we all are in agreement of what we think the final of this one is going to be. And Blake, I'll just let you take it away and tell the people at home what we're thinking about this game.
Yeah, a similar spot to where FSU was. I hate to discredit what Liberty's done this year. A 13-0 season is always going to be something to celebrate. Even in the CUSA. I mean, it's 13-0 is a tough thing to do. It rarely happens. Going undefeated in regular season and then winning your conference title game is something that deserves to be celebrated for Liberty. Great for them for doing that. It's been a great season for the Flames. But the reward they get is to play Oregon in a bowl game. Oregon will be without JPJ on the interior offensive line. One of the best interior offensive linemen in the country this year for sure. Um, but with that being the only loss there, not an ideal situation for Liberty. Oregon keeps pretty much everything else intact. And truth be told, they are going to bulldoze through this team. The it's a massive, massive talent gap. Um, it's just not going to be overcomable, really, in any sense of the word for Liberty. I think Oregon's gonna, if they want to run the football, they'll just run it down their throat. If they want to let Bo Nix rip it through the air, they'll do that. I mean, just toss it out to Troy Franklin out wide on a quick hitter, and he'll do something after the catch like he's done all year long. It's not going to be a good time for Liberty. Enjoy being in the bowl game, celebrate it. It's pretty special to be there. But at the end of the day, this one's going to end pretty ugly, I think. I've got Oregon taking this one 41-17 and a pretty good beatdown.
Yeah, I think Tyler agrees with you on this one. He's going 45-21 in Oregon's favor, and I do agree as well. I just think Oregon is going to outmatch Liberty in all facets of the game in this game. They don't, like you said, JPJ is really the main opt-out for them. They got Troy Franklin. They've got, Tez Johnson. They've got their running backs of Bucky Irving and Jones. They've got Bo Nix in this game. So, they're basically at full potential, and they're going against a team that's I think was the wrong group of five team that should have made a bowl, and even the team I thought should have made the group of five bid for the New Year's Six bowl ended up losing their bowl game. So I think that Oregon is just going to outclass this Liberty team. Period. Simple as that. They're going to be better than them. I'm going to go 37-3. Oregon big in this one. Not even close. Not even a blink in the eye. I think that the Ducks are going to roll in this one, and that'll be all for our college football playoff and New Year's Six bowl predictions. That's our preview. We went through it today. Went through the main New Year's Six bowl games. Went through the playoff semifinals. Make sure to stay tuned. We've been posting pretty regularly around our bowl picks throughout the entire season, or entire really postseason that we've gone right now. I believe we're all pretty similar, about 500. Around that, one of us might be a little ahead of the other. We'll obviously keep you posted moving forward, but we've had a lot of fun with that. We're going to keep it going and make sure to keep an update on where we end up with our standings and our win percentages. And obviously after the New Year's Day, we will be back and we will be recapping the New Year's Six games, specifically the playoff games, and we will give you our national championship preview, so make sure to not miss that. But for Blake, this is Cade signing off. You have been listening to the Orbit Football Podcast.